He climbed over the hood of the car and over the cab and into the bed of the truck in the back, and they just drove off as hard as they could to try to throw him out. And he finally just jumped out and started running back up to the farm towards the property as fast as he could. The two neighbors who live next to Carolyn in Tahuya were never asked to give statements, but they probably could still. At this point, Carolyn just stayed at her neighbor's house until she knew that the cops were coming up the driveway. This led us all to believe that Dylan was going to prison, probably because he already had a prior felony for mushrooms, and we were pretty sure that he was going to go away for a long time. And that's exactly what Sergeant Severance and Officer LaFrance had told Stacy and Carolyn. They said that it was obvious what had happened, and Dylan was most likely going to be going away for a very, very long time. Dylan was booked into Mason County Jail on June 20th in the afternoon, more towards the evening after 5 o'clock. So actually his paperwork on Washington courts says June 21st, 2016, but all of this happened on June 20th, 2016. It was a Monday. It was at this point that Dylan's dad, Scott Eggers, told me that his arraignment date was the 7th of July, 2016. The night that Dylan got arrested and put in Mason County Jail in Shelton, Washington, his mom called me. And I was working nights, but it was a caregiving job and everyone was asleep, so I had the time to talk to her. And I stayed with her on the phone for several hours, and she was very intoxicated and she was very upset because the charges that he was booked into in Mason County said rape and assault with a deadly weapon, 2 counts of each. And she was just very upset that those were what they were. She fully acknowledged that the charges were rape and assault with a deadly weapon. And I stayed on the phone with her until the early hours of the morning, trying to console with her and convince her that she wasn't a bad mom because her son had done something like this. Stacy and her partner at the time, Kevin, went to the office at Eastmont Baptist Church and talked to Annette Eggers, Dylan's mom, about what had happened once she got back to Wenatchee. And Annette cried and admitted that the charges were rape to Stacy, and she apologized and hugged her, and Stacy wasn't even there to get an apology. She just was still in shock and wanted, to kind of console with Annette and see where to go from there. And Annette immediately just apologized to Stacy, hugged her, and then immediately harped on the fact that she thought that this happened because Dylan was on drugs. She just totally said that this happened because Dylan was on drugs. 72 hours after Dylan was arrested and put in Mason County Jail, he was released to the sidewalk in Shelton, Washington. I was told by the Eggers family, by Dylan's mom, on a phone call that Dylan had been released because no charges had been made against him already. And the only time that Stacy and Carolyn had been asked if they wanted to press charges was right after it happened. And they both said no, because in that moment, as he was walking away in handcuffs, they were both in shock and they didn't want to do anything. So this was only 3 days later, 72 hours later. And Annette calls me and says that Dylan's been released because no charges were pressed against him. Come to find out down the road, months later, someone in the Eggers family actually bailed Dylan out, and that's why he got out only after 3 days. Or after only 3 days, was because his family bailed him out. Nonetheless, Annette asked me if I knew anyone in Olympia who could go pick up Dylan, because I had lived in Olympia for 6 years while I was at college, and I might still know someone there who could come pick him up, because the closest person who they knew was Dylan's grandma in Kent, which was like 40 minutes more of a drive. So I told her no, because I didn't honestly really have any connections in Olympia anymore anyways. But something just felt kind of weird about it. Later in that same day, I got a call from Stacy, and she was really upset because she had found out that Dylan had gotten out, and the Eggers had not told her or Carolyn that he had gotten out. They had not given Stacy or Carolyn any means of protecting themselves, and they did not warn them that he had been released. Stacy decided at this time that the best thing to do for her daughter and her family at the time was to go get a no contact order against Dylan, because he lived just down the road from where she was living, and he knows the house and he had been over several times. So Stacy was just scared that he was going to come back into town and come straight over and attack her again. As soon as the Eggers were made aware that Stacy had a no contact order against Dylan, they stopped talking to anyone. They stopped giving anyone information, and they quit returning phone calls and text messages and everything. Stacy had called Annette twice and just left voicemails asking to her to confirm that the arraignment date was the 7th. And what ended up happening was I just messaged Scott, who was Dylan's dad, and asked when the arraignment was, because I needed to take work off to show up there anyways. And I've known Dylan for 15 years of my life, so, of course I was willing to take work off to go be present for something like this. Scott then did a 180 and framed the situation like Stacy was harassing them, when in reality she had called them twice and simply asked them to confirm the court date that they had originally stated. Scott just told me that he was not at liberty to say, and that we should just leave Dylan alone while he goes through this. Stacy ended up just calling Mason County Court, and we found out through calling for information that Dylan's arraignment date was actually July 5th, not July 7th. So his mom and dad had told us that it was the 7th, hoping that we would show up on the 7th instead of showing up on the 5th. But on the 5th of July, 2016, myself, Dylan's 2 childhood friends, Kevin and Dusty, Stacy and Carolyn, the 5 of us showed up at Mason County to be there for what should have been Dylan's arraignment. When Dylan got out of the car, he was there with his mom and his dad and his grandma, who lives in Kent, the one who Stacy had met, and Carolyn had actually met her months before also. They kind of sneered at us and, I don't know, tried not to look at us directly, and then they lit up cigarettes and smoked for a minute and then went inside. And Dylan stood in there for 10 minutes, and then the judge said that he had no formal charges against him, so he was free to go. It was really frustrating to see the way that even just the sight of Dylan sent Stacy into a panic. As soon as Dylan saw that I was at the courthouse, and as soon as he left the courthouse, he blocked me on Facebook. And the couple weeks in between when Dylan attacked Stacy and Carolyn and when he showed up in court, he had stayed my friend on social media and on Instagram and Facebook, but he had not said anything to me. He didn't text me, he didn't call me. He had apparently talked to Dusty about what had happened and confessed everything. And he had apparently talked to his lawyer and told his lawyer about everything that happened, but he never talked to me. He never talked to me again after this happened, and I have not talked to him since. So in our confusion, we went and tried to ask some questions about why he left so quickly, and the only thing that the courts would tell us was that the only thing that the prosecutor would tell us is that he did not yet have Stacy and Carolyn's statements about what had happened from Mason County Sheriff's Office, which none of us think is true because Carolyn had given her statement like 2 days after Dylan had attacked her, and a couple days after that, a policeman from Mason County drove all the way to Wenatchee to get Stacy's statement in person. So Mason County Sheriff's Office did have the statements. There's no reason that the courts wouldn't have the statements a week later. But that's the excuse we were given, was that Dylan wasn't charged because Stacy and Carolyn's only chance to press charges was at Dylan's time of arrest, which we don't know if that's true or not. But we were told by the prosecutor that that was the only time they can press charges, so now it's up to the state to charge Dylan. So that's what we were waiting for in the weeks after this happened. We were waiting for the courts to charge him, for the prosecutor to get the statements and to charge him. And we found out through Dusty that Dylan had read Stacy and Carolyn's statements through his lawyer. But to this day, Stacy and Carolyn have never read Dylan's statements. We have never seen them, but we know that he has seen Stacy and Carolyn's for sure. Every time Stacy and Carolyn called the court back or called the prosecutor back, and the prosecutor's name is Jason something, we cannot find his last name. But this was, June 2016, whoever the prosecutor was then. So a few weeks later, Stacy and Carolyn got notification from the courts that the charges were completely dropped and that the state was not going to charge Dylan, and that was that, and we should just all move on with our lives. This was obviously really confusing and really frustrating, considering in the weeks before the prosecutor had told Carolyn and Stacy that they should prepare for battle because he's going to be on their side the whole way, and he never takes on cases that he can't win. That's what he told them. And then all of a sudden, he just lost steam and lost motivation, and the charges got dropped. To be honest, I don't think the prosecutor was honest with any of us ladies from the start. I think that everything he said was to just get our hopes up and then get us, out of the way. All we've gotten since from the court is vague answers, and also it's important to note that when his charges were dropped, Stacy's restraining order, no contact order through Douglas County that she got as soon as she got back to East Wenatchee was dropped also. So a few days later, she was still living down the street from Dylan, and she had zero protection from anyone. He could have just walked right up back to her house, no problem, and gotten to her or her child. After we went to court on July 5th, 2016, we left Shelton and we went up to the farm with Carolyn to see where all of this happened. And Stacy showed me around the property, and she showed me everything that she had told me before. And as we were walking back to where she was hiding and where she was having her final moments of struggle with Dylan before the cops rolled up, we both were looking at the ground, and we both at the same time put our eyes on the same exact bead that he tried to get Stacy to swallow. It was still on the ground where Stacy and him had struggled and where they had hopped up when the police got there. We looked all around the property for the knife, but we never found it. What's also really frustrating is that Carolyn lost the farm. She no longer could maintain the land out there because Dylan was helping her maintain it while she was working elsewhere in the state. So Carolyn completely lost the farm, and that was one of the last times she was there. And the 5 of us who went to court that day drove all the way back home. And the reason I'm making this video is because I feel like the last year I've just been waiting and waiting for justice to happen. And I've been waiting and waiting to feel safe from this person. And I'm not. And no one is really, because somehow, in some way, he's still walking around. I've heard that he's in Seattle. There's a possibility that he's in Spokane. He knows people all around the state. His family lives in WENATCHEE, and he has like major roots here, so I know that he'll always be back here. I know that he frequents barter fair and festivals around the state, and Dylan will try to fool you. Like, he'll try to act really intrinsic and really mystical, and he'll try to make you think that he's a good person. But the fact of the matter is, he totally did this, and as soon as I tried to make sense of it and put two and two together and he saw that, he completely cut me out of his life. And so did his family. And these were people who, like, didn't mind when I was coming home on the weekends from college at, like, 2 in the morning to, like, go through their house to the basement to, like, cuddle with their son. And what's more is that Dylan has, like, had problems with sex for a long time. I know for a fact that for about 6 months before this was going on, Dylan was going to sex therapy, and he quit going. And I know that in the months before this, his most recent ex-girlfriend broke up with him because he videotaped her masturbating, which by all definitions is sexual assault. And like, he was trying to start up a crystal business, I heard. And I've heard people already say that, you know, the lynch mob is out for Dylan in WENATCHEE. And that's not really what this is. It's just that he's done this horrible thing, and now he's trying to live his life. And that's the reason he hasn't been around WENATCHEE, because he doesn't want to be here. He's already tried to go to shows in Seattle and Everett. He showed up to Dusty's show in Everett recently and tried to make small talk. He goes to the Clearwater in East Wenatchee every once in a while. I saw him drive his van towards Barter Fair during Barter Fair weekend, so I'm sure that he went to that after all of this happened. And just for the record, Dylan has tried to sleep with me several times since high school, and I always told him no. I never consented to it, and I openly talked to him about it and told him that I'm just not comfortable with it for some reason that I don't even know yet. And he was always pushing it on me. And one of the things that he said to me in the months before this happened, we were just cuddling on the couch in his living room, and he told me, "Don't be afraid of me. Don't be afraid of me." And I told him, "I just want to cuddle with you. I just want to sit here and cuddle with you." And he said, "Don't be afraid of me. You don't have to be afraid of me." And now I know for a fact that there is very, like, valid reasons for anyone to be afraid of this person. And everyone should know what happened, and everyone should be able to make decisions about whether they want him in their life or not, based upon the truth of what he did. And that's why I've been really frustrated in WENATCHEE these last few months, because there's been several people who have been mutual friends with Dylan and I who listened to the story and accepted this as truth, and then turned around and accepted Dylan back into their lives. And I understand that Dylan is going to tell whatever story he wants people to hear. But if the courts aren't going to offer any protection for these two women after they've been attacked, then they have every right to tell their side of the story. They have every right to tell their story. And if Dylan ever sees this, I just want to say that I don't understand how you're trying to go forward with a normal life after you have caused so much destruction in others' lives. And I also find it completely ridiculous that I opened up to you about my own rape story 2 weeks before this happened, and then you just turned around and raped 2 other human beings. but I saw it, and I understand why you blocked me. It was just because I got too close to your truth. One of the things that was starting to alarm me about Dylan's behavior was how dark his poetry had become, because he had always been writing poetry since high school, but in the last year or so it'd become really dark. And this particular poem that he posted, it was the last one he posted before he took Stacy to Tahuya. It was posted on June 18th, 2016. He also reposted this poem a few days ago this year, June 2017. But I encourage everyone to go look up his name. Go to the name search on Washington courts. Just Google Washington name search and look up Dylan Joseph James Eggers. Some people know him as Bojangles. I hope everyone that sees this, who wants to share it, won't be afraid to share it. And I hope everyone arms themselves with the truth. Because this dude fooled me for 14 years of my life, but not anymore. Peace out.